We're going to have to make one. Hello. Welcome to the Honest Wargamer. This is Thursday. I'll be the drummer boy.
Actually, no. You were going with more like the Balrog lurking in the darkness drum thing. I went with
No. I'm more going for 18th century 12-year-old drummer boy in the lineman infantry for the English. It's like you were doing the tootling and I was doing the drumming, the accompanying.
That's where I went. Yep.
Welcome to the Old World Thursday Show, episode 1. Episode 1. First in.
Number one.
So, last week on the stream, me in the chat started talking about the Old World. There was an announcement. There was a dev blog about the Old World. And so we decided, I've decided, I think Old World was going to be massive. And so we decided to get in early doors. I don't mind saying that. Get in early. Get you all on the train with us as we go through this journey and discuss where the Old World's at now, the miniatures coming out, how we're maybe going to play it, what tournament's going to look like. Obviously, this will become the home of the competitive maybe it'll become the home of the competitive Old World stuff.
Don't say that. I'll have to leave.
Okay, well, any of these things, we don't know. But this is episode 1, and I'm joined by Val, and I'm going to introduce him. Otherwise, he is not going to introduce himself properly. But Val has been very conscientious in wargaming, was a huge lead developer on the 40k stats and 40kstats.com, which really helped propagate and push a more professional 40k environment, which is very good. And then also decided at the very height of 40k's kind of like strength during just coming out of the pandemic, we got into this huge explosion of 40k stuff, streams, events, everything kicking off, and Val was like, I'm going to play the Old World instead. Yeah. Completely abandoned 40k and got into the Old World. Hello, Val, how are you?
Not only was it the peak of 40k, but I was literally like at the bleeding edge of it, streaming it. So like I did all of the US Open events and all the frontline events, which at that time were probably some of the biggest events in the world for singles competitive 40k. And I thought to myself, I can't do this anymore. I'm out of here. And so I think the pandemic really programmed me to return to the Old World through some of their awesome video games. We played, I do believe, on this very channel. One of the things I'm sure that it sparked the love affair, which is Vermintide. And of course, we've both flushed many hours of our lives down the toilet, swirling about in that lovely maelstrom of war known as Total War Warhammer 2 and now 3. That's how I got nipped by the delightful.
Yeah, you got caught up during lockdown, during Total War. You were like, "Hey, Ramo, this any good?" And I was like, "Give it a try." And then, I didn't hear from you for 5 days, and then you were like, "I've done 9 orc campaigns. I'm a god."
To be fair. So I guess this is 3 years ago now. It's like, looks like there's some bad stuff happening over in China. I get back from the LVO. I'm on the plane. I'm one of basically all the Asian people, none of the white guys wearing masks. I'm like, wonder if they know something. I get back. The NBA's like, you know what? Fuck this. We're not playing basketball anymore. At that moment, I'm like, I have to immediately go to a computer store and buy a laptop. And I did, and I got a gaming. I ran to a computer store before they shut down for months. Got myself a gaming PC because I knew it was time to play Total War Warhammer 2, and I just didn't have the technology. So that's It was very much. It was slightly before our on-air love affair began, but yes, no, it was definitely Total War time, and it carried on to the tabletop since.
Yeah, well, listen, there's loads to discuss about everything, but Val's going to give us kind of like a catch-up on where we're at now with the whole thing. Some of these shows may be really anarchic. Some of these shows may just be like, hey, we don't know what's happening yet. I've got a sneaky, just straight off the bat, I got a sneaky suspicion we get a launch this year. A lot of people saying I'm too keen on that. A lot of people thinking there's a whole kind of when will it be released? We won't cover that today, but I think that probably this year, but it might not be. It might be next year. So this may be jumping the gun a lot, but that is kind of okay because the old world, or Warhammer Fantasy Battle, or Ninth Age, any of those things, whatever you want to call it now, currently, exists. It exists and is playable, and that's why Val is here, because Val has deep dived and is an active member of that community ongoing. So it's kind of, you kind of got these kind of two views on the upcoming release. You have, I'm excited because I can't wait to see what it looks like. I don't have any dog in the current race. But Val's like, I'm training the dogs, like I'm brushing their hair, like I'm feeding them premium dog food, and I am got many dogs upon this race. So is there a consensus on like I don't even know where the world community is. I assume at real ale pubs, bemoaning that women have rights now.
Yeah, it's the. So first of all, before you dip your toe in, especially if you go to like the Facebook community, like the Old World Facebook group, it is a just frothy cesspit of terrible takes and people too extreme probably for horse heresy. So I would say that right now, as things stand, like in some of the broader groups, rule number one, don't go to those groups. Like, we're long past the point here, guys, where we need to be going into Facebook groups and really stressing ourselves out watching people say terrible things all the time. There are a plethora of other sources that you can go to, like, for example, Old World Thursdays on the Honest War Gamer. Hell yeah. But since you left, I'm not sure if everyone here knows that that Rob's Twitter handle, Six Dice Skills, is in fact an 8th edition Warhammer allusion. It is a reference to a bygone Magic phase, and that's where we left off. We left off in 8th edition in the end times, and people carrying on after that. There was this great fracturing. It reminds me a lot. Well, it reminds me a little bit of how, before GW stepped in and started doing mission packs and stuff, there are all sorts of different ways to play 40K competitively. And although they all use the same core rule set, I'd say right now, as it stands, there are 3, maybe 4 ways to play Warhammer Fantasy and potentially find a game. Which kind of game you find will depend very much on your area. Here in Toronto, I would say the most popular edition is Thomas Pirinen's Warhammer Fantasy Battle 6th edition. Yes.
Wait,
I don't know why.
Wait, we're not playing 8th edition. What happened? We went back 2 editions.
Well, this is the thing. I play 8th edition, but my city is really weird. And anything that seems very, like in the tabletop Warhammer, like, milieu of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, they were like this with 40K too. When I started playing in 7th edition, everyone was playing like Horus Heresy, and like anyone who played actual Warhammer was a tryhard. ITC was evil. So here it is. There's a general thought that Warhammer Fantasy Battle 6th edition by Thomas Pirinen is in fact the best balanced. It is the most well written and put together edition. The reality is, as always, some things are very good in Warhammer Fantasy Battle 6th edition, and I think people just, for whatever reason, nostalgically like that edition. It's before they brought in a lot of the big models. So I have tremendous ADHD, and I have spent probably 90. What is 90? I'm trying to think of a year and a half, and I tried to say 90 months, but that's not correct. 90 minutes would be an hour and a half. Anyway, I have tremendous ADHD. And so I have gone deep. I'm like a Warhammer fantasy anthropologist at this point. I've tried to piece it all together. So we're going through the layers here. But Warhammer Fantasy Battle 6th edition sure feels like a very, depending on where you are, very played edition right now. That is the edition of the original Grimdark coming to fantasy. 5th edition previous to that would have been your Hero Hammer. Very analogous to 2nd edition Warhammer 40K. Fantasy Battles 6th edition is essentially the Warhammer 40,000 3rd edition equivalent. They reboot the whole system.
So it's a big reboot. Wow.
It's a reboot. It's a hard reset.
When was that? Do we know the date? I bet you do know the date.
I'd say it's about the year 2000.
Wow.
About the year
Okay.
2000.
We could turn that
This
into a
is-
song. In the year 2000.
Which is wild because that 6th edition, the game dies or they unplug it in 2015, 2 editions later. So that gives you a little idea of how heavily supported this game was, and why it failed is because
Massively.
they killed it. I don't want to ruin my podcast series called Who Killed Warhammer Fantasy, but the answer is quite clearly Games Workshop killed Warhammer Fantasy. But anyway.
Just 1 second, Val, before we get, because I'm very interested in the kind of history and lore, because we need this, right? Like, this is kind of one of those odd things where, like, I had this. I won't be too long in this point, but on Tuesday for Necromunda, they've just released a brand new Necromunda miniature, Val. I couldn't even Google where you found the rules for it. We're not talking a dead game that unsupported by the company. We're talking about a current release in current production. I had to ask people, right? So we're talking about like some wilderness level stuff. And so having all this background, how we ended up where we are now, I think is a great start to.
Sorry, I'm going to go a little more wizard cosplay here.
That reminds me of Warhammer Dark Omen.
I'm the advisor in Total War.
Oh, nice.
Master, they are massed by the mountains. They are coming for your gold.
By the way, Mashby, who's in the chat, says in Buenos Aires, we also play 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And I just said,
Boom.
I said boom, and also apologies for, like, you know, I hate the bugs too. I can't believe what they did to Buenos Aires. That's terrible, awful. And then, okay, so this is good feed. We need this kind of like background. We need to know what's going on and where we're at. So just a TLDR very quickly. Warhammer, like, because did you ever get into the etymology? I know that's for words, but like, did you ever get into history of like, it started out because it was D&D, right? It was D&D.
Oh! You want to go that far back?
Do you know what? I think this is good for all of us. I think this is good for all of us. Give us the timeline. Start me off. I'm ready. I'm ready.
This brings in some keywords too that are very much on point right now. Very zeitgeisty. Hashtag OGL. Hashtag free D&D. So.
Clip that out. That's
the history of Games Workshop as a company, back when they were in fact a workshop in which they sold games. Started by Ian Jackson and something Livingstone, who made the really cool RPG Choose Your Own Adventure books that I think some of us may have grown up on. Anyway,
I think his name was Harold Livingston.
Harold I don't think it's Harold.
I'm going to go for Harold and let's not Google it. Let's just continue on forever. That's part of the show now. Harold Livingston.
Harold Livingston, I presume. Anyway.
Creator of Warhammer.
This is the 1970s. And, because they're white boomers from the 70s, they just call the guys who made Dungeons & Dragons and were like, right, so could we sell your game exclusively in the United Kingdom? And the guy on the other end of the phone, because again, it's the 1970s, and this is how you just made millions of dollars.
While they're all just smoking. They're all smoking.
Hacking darts, like pinching bums. And then the answer is, yeah. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. What's your address? I'll just mail you over a binding contract that lets you basically print money for zero reason whatsoever. And that's what happens. The most popular friggin' game at that moment, it's like it becoming a bit of a cultural phenomenon in circles. Dungeons and Dragons is now exclusively distributed by Games Workshop, and these two guys, and that is where Games Workshop's initial push comes from. Now they're up in, I think they actually are starting in Nottingham. That might be a lie, but at any rate, they do have a friend who also makes miniatures, and they bring in this guy to start making some minis to play in the games. And like the delightful IP pirates that they are, they immediately start noticing that people buy a ton of these minis, far more minis than they ever actually would need to play Dungeons and Dragons. And probably responding to the demands of the market, they realized that they could probably make a lot more money not paying royalties and selling someone else's product by designing something that's very much like Dungeons and Dragons, but maybe scaled up so that you can play with armies. And this is where Warhammer Fantasy Battles comes from. It comes from a desire to be able to sell mass battle games rather than individual models to increase the volume of miniatures being sold because there's a huge demand for it. I think it's both. It was a craven and very, very astute capitalist choice to lean into selling more models than rules, because you also make a lot more money selling models than rules. Hashtag D&D is under monetized.
Well, how the turntables though, because they do not believe that in 2023. They're like, how do we sell more paper books?
Well, it's both, but nonetheless, that is where it comes from, and then it basically takes off from there. That's 1983, as we all know. We're in the glorious 40th year of Warhammer. 4 years later, they say, right, what if we just put all these people in space? And that's where Warhammer 40K comes from, and it's literally that dumb. And we've been just sucking up that gruel ever since.
Like good infantrymen in the Empire.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I've got me Albert.
It's delicious. It's fantastic. And but Warhammer then probably Fantasy Battles morphs into something that we would recognize as Fantasy Battles probably somewhere around their 3rd edition. So Fantasy, if you think of Warhammer Fantasy as being about 2 ahead of wherever 40K is, like in edition wise, that's where it would be. So Warhammer 40K now at 10th edition is now about equal in editions and development timeline as Warhammer Fantasy Battles, if that makes any sense. But yeah, so when original Rogue Traders coming out, they're on their 3rd edition in Warhammer Fantasy. The one that we all remember probably as like maybe even the first Warhammer thing you remember would be Bretonnian's Lizardmen. That box set is the 5th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and it's known as Hero Hammer. It's got the big bright colors, and like it would be very similar to that 2nd edition box with the old Goth orcs and the Gretchens with the auto guns. So that'd be the same sort of era of Games Workshop. Both of those games are when that's really when Games Workshop as we know it kind of supernovas. That's when they become there you go. So like that era, the early 90s, is where you actually see the original owners bought out in a management takeover. So basically, that's where Kirby and his homies.
Yeah, there's currently a book out about that, isn't there? The Dice Men. Have you picked it up and read it?
I ordered it. Oh. And now that you mention it, I have no idea where the hell my copy is.
Oh, wow. So, because we even talked about it on the Monday show the other day, James discussed it, and he said it was like pretty crazy. Because it sounds like this is the edition where the corpos bought out the artists.
Well, the corpo, it's somewhere in the 90s. There's what's called a management buyout. So essentially, the managers of the company, because it's becoming quite a large retail chain. I don't know when they start expanding internationally, but I do suspect it's somewhere in this era, because this is around when I start seeing it in malls in Canada, as you know, and I'm sure in the United States too. That part would be pretty interesting to learn more about. I don't actually know when it becomes a global phenomenon, or like when they start expanding to all the corners of the Commonwealth. But that's where Warhammer becomes very familiar. I would say is the sort of the early 90s, 92, 93 in there.
This is interesting because we got the box on the screen for podcast homies. You won't be able to see it. You can go look at it yourself. Pretty cool.
Do you have the reverse side of that with it's got a card. It has a card cut out like Watchtower in it. It's got the cool. Yeah, there you go.
It's got a cardboard house in it.
Yeah, a little cardboard house.
I really like that it's got, so just for the podcast people, so I can explain what's in the box, there is there's a kind of like a tower, like a castle tower there, which is made from paper, obviously, and fold out. Then there's by the way, not to rag on Tabletop Titans too much, but it looks like pop-up terrain has been an idea for a while, just saying. Yeah. Right, there's a pop-out house, and there's also a pop-up outhouse, which I don't know if it's meant to be a chicken coop, but it does look like it might be a lavatory. And then you got templates, a giant template, as in for giants that have fallen over, and all sorts of shenanigans. Pretty cool looking. Is this the one you started with?
This is actually the first Warhammer anything I played. Would have been out of this box. The first thing I ever collected was an Empire Fantasy Army, all in pewter. The only plastic kit at the time was a halberdier just standing there like this. Somehow still worth money on eBay. It's unbelievable. I don't understand.
So interesting, Mashby with the hot info in the chat. The first Spanish edition of Fantasy was actually 4th edition. So it could be that this is the 4th edition was the first time that they started to do other language versions.
Yeah, start expanding outside of the house. It's great. They're onto a good idea, and then immediately something inside the British mind thinks, I must conquer the world. And so out they go to colonize and crush local cultures of tabletop gaming. There was once a proud tradition of Canadian tabletop games, all wiped out by the British in a quick stretch of cultural imperialism.
just classic English stuff, which is great. Which is really,
I made that all up.
Oh.
We've never made anything ourselves. Come on, we just chop down trees and sell it for stuff. All right.
So we ended up there, and then you said 6th edition is where we kind of got like modernized fantasy. So around the 2000s. So that's the big. Is that the armies of chaos, or the that I hear so much about? Because just for clarity for everyone in the chat, I went to Warhammer Fantasy Battle at 8th edition. I'd never collected it previously, but we did discover that I had engaged with Warhammer content earlier in my life, playing the PlayStation 1 game Warhammer Dark Omen, which was a Warhammer Fantasy Battle game, which we are going to do a live stream of over one weekend. I'm going to try and complete the game in a weekend, me in the chat, which I remember being like a 12-year-old kid and being frustrated. I could never complete it. So I'm looking forward to that. But 6th edition, what happened there?
So 6th edition. Well, if we back up here, there's a playbook that's already been established, and so you've got over in the 40K version, and also I want to say in '94. I want to say that in the era of 5th edition, I feel like fantasy is the lead game, and I think this is the case when I come into play. That 40K was for the kids. 40K was the not it's the same thing you hear sometimes now from AOS people, where 40K is the smooth brain version of the very tactical fantasy battles. And if you were the kids played 40K, and I had a very nerdy friend, and so when I said, I just saw someone playing Warhammer and it was cool, and it was actually the 2nd edition starter set that I played in a friend's basement, he immediately corrected me and said, no, that's for idiots. You want to play fantasy. So fantasy, I feel like at that moment was still their lead product. I don't know when 40K passes them. In fact, I have an idea. I believe it's in 1998. In 1998, you've got Andy Chambers and his commitment doubling down, the removal, the death of irony in Warhammer 40K. It becomes the grim dark. It becomes very much a straight setting of this place sucks, and here's a lot of awful. And also, it's amazing. By the way, I rag on Warhammer at Games Workshop, but it's amazing. And 3rd edition 40K is what catapults them, I think, to the lead, and it's a complete reboot. They scrap everything. They drop all the fancy primary colors, all that kind of stuff, and they come out with this basically what our index is, like in the back of the 3rd edition rulebook, and they start 40K again. And so 2 years later, they follow up with the same thing in fantasy.
So I have a kind of like another take on this, if anyone is interested, like on why 40K became so wildly popular around that time, because in the year 1997, the film Starship Troopers was released.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that set the tone of people wanting to be space warriors forevermore. Like, that was, I think, a seminal film in almost every... I think every young boy across the realms and across the world watch Starship Troopers, because it's a film that requires almost no and across language as well. You never even needed to understand what was being said in those films, although obviously what was being said was fantastic. But I would say that the launch of Starship Troopers catapulted to 40K far more than any other stuff. But that's a side note.
Well, I mean, there's that, and also 4 years later, to coincide with 6 years later, when they released 4th edition Warhammer 40K, there's a little game that is released alongside it called Dawn of War.
Yes.
And Dawn of War, I think, is where I think that's truly where 40K becomes, the game. And there's a lot of things here, by the way, that are going to beat up fantasy as it's coming out of the gate. Year 2000 6th edition drops. The year 2001, however, here's another answer to who killed Warhammer Fantasy. Year 2001, Rob, what most incredible thing releases in 2001 and blows all of our freaking nerd brains out? Thank you, Gangster's Paradise. Lord of the Rings is released in the year 2001. Games Workshop signs the rights deal, which is awesome, by the way, because it's not a rights deal with Tolkien's estate. It's a rights deal with New Line Cinemas. So they have the rights to produce tabletop miniatures and games based on the IP of the movies themselves. So it's not actually. So that's a cool thing. Kind of makes you think about how the Amazon merchandise license might wind up working. But anyway, they have the rights to produce this game. So you now have two Fantasy Battles games. One is supported by the biggest film probably in my lifetime. That series of films was I don't
know what you're saying about that. Minions: Rise of Gru has just come out. So.
But I mean, as far as cinematic moments in my life, sitting down and watching Fellowship of the Ring was a seminal moment, right? It was a big deal, and it was a big deal for the next 3 years. So Games Workshop has a license to print money off of that license. It's a license they're paying for. It's a fantasy-based license. It's a mass battles game. It's written by Silvio Salvatore. I hope I just said his name right. Salvatore? Silvio Salvatore? Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's well regarded. Continues to be produced these days. And meanwhile, they've got another game on their shelves with very tired old rules. They're not paying money to license it, so therefore, if they don't invest in it or advertise it, if they don't invest in it,
that's the other thing we haven't talked about. They do have soft marketing, but we have to be very conscious that until literally, what was it, 8 years ago? 8 years ago, so 2017. Oh no, that's wrong math. 2000, whatever it was, 2000 something. They didn't have a marketing department dedicated to marketing. Sure, they had shops. Sure, they ran magazine ads. They had White Dwarf, but they didn't have shops. They didn't have advertising proper as we know it. As you would have seen, a He-Man advert on the TV, but never have seen a Warhammer advert on the TV, unless you were watching some local network TV in the United States where they sold franchises and those franchisees paid for local ad spots. But that's a side note. That's a deep dive.
I didn't know they ever sold franchises. But anyway, yes, marketing is a problem. So also, here's another thing, though. If you're rolling through the mall, which is, I think, where this is actually one of my theories about the game in general, is that the death of the mall is probably long run going to kill the game off slowly. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The retailers would be in malls, high foot traffic areas where you could walk by and see it. And if you're one of those people where you could walk by and you saw the miniatures, like I was, to be honest with you, I looked by, I would see the miniatures and I go, holy shit, what is that? And you hear that story all the time. Little kid or teen or whomever walking by, you see the models and you're like, what the hell is this? I want to see it. Now, you might have also been a person who walked by and saw it and be like, that looks dumb. Or, oh, only nerds go in there. But when you walk by and you see Viggo Mortensen's fucking, gritty, deep-lined face that could, murder a Russian naked in a bathhouse, now you might be thinking, well, maybe this is a cool place. And you go into Games Workshop and you check out because they got LOTR. Maybe you pick up 40K instead, whatever, doesn't matter. But it gets you through the door, and they also do sell a butt ton of Lord of the Rings stuff. I think that's a big moment because that happens right after they reboot Fantasy. So how much does anyone give a shit about Warhammer Fantasy when they are at the same time producing 2 fantasy-based games, one supported by the weight of the zeitgeist and the entire world, the other one with a humble, 17 years of existence, but nonetheless at the time considered derivative, old-fashioned, and not very cool. So that's where we are, I think, when 6th edition launches. That all being said, 6th edition, because of its commitment to the grimdark, it has sort of a probably, as far as like fantasy feel is concerned, it's similar, maybe a little bit higher in the realm of highness of fantasy than something like A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones. There's magic in the world. Probably there's a lot of magic in the world, I should say. Sorry, but there's probably less magic in the world of Game of Thrones. But it's still kind of more gritty. Magic's dangerous. You don't just like frivolously cast spells and shit. You want to like be careful with your magic. That's sort of the world of Warhammer Fantasy. The humans are the humans, so they have like oppressive regimes that try and like hide the realities of this very awful place from their populace. I think one of the things I think someone pointed out to me about what makes fantasy particularly cool is that unlike in 40K, where the humans are all augmented cybernetic beings that live for 1,000 years or whatever and may or may not be good people, in fantasy battles there is like this amongst the humans, there is more of heroic qualities, right? There are, I would say, you can call good guys in Warhammer Fantasy, and that's really awesome.
Karl Franz is trying to protect an empire, and that empire is pretty standard human fare, right? Like, you are just dudes. I don't think you're a bit too encroachy. I don't know though, like, because like one of the things to talk about, like obviously for the old world, and people who've listened this far and aren't aware, like the old world lore is very, very kind of like centralized on the human world that we live in. Like they're all from regions. The empire's Germanic, effectively, like, and the Norse, or like kind of the chaos kind of warriors are just from the north a little bit, so they're Swedish Vikings, etc. And then you unfortunately get into some like real problematic kind of like depictions of other races and types. And so there's a real good conversation about, like, I guess in a traditional fantasy setting, they are, in quotes, the good guys, like in traditional fantasy settings. But those traditional fantasy tropes, many of which came from Tolkien, who Tolkien himself, upon learning about like how certain far-right groups like the Nazis like considered like his, like, there was a huge shift of Tolkien just in how he wrote dwarfs, for example, between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Yeah, he was like, he wrote that, and then people were like, yeah, those people are like that, and he's like, no, fuck no, different, like, now I'm going to rewrite it. And so some of those tropes became very permeated full-time into fantasy. And so, like, while I agree with you, there are good guys in this more than the kind of like ambiguous kind of like motivations of like some of the other settings that exist. Like, I would say that some of it needs to be like at least thought about like sensitively. I think that's fair, and has lost us several viewers immediately. Hey, if you are about to write the
10,
word,
in fact,
if you're about
10
to
people got out.
if you're about to write the word woke in the YouTube comment, I think you're a piece of shit. So let's just move on from there.
Yeah, and also last time I touched on Tolkien and this topic, I revealed myself to be far more ignorant than I thought I was. And in general, guys, this is all fascinating, like history of the game and stuff. Please go out there, form your own opinions. But fundamentally, all fantasy races, and we call them races. Let's just start there, right? Like, we don't call these, we don't call them factions. We call them races. Like they're generally speaking a collection of tropes. Some of them more thinly veiled than others. When I said good, I was speaking more from the perspective of from world building and storytelling. There are characters in this that can only be perhaps viewed, or there are characters in these games that are much more relatable than, say, your average Space Marine, or even Guardsman, or Commissar, or any other human proxy in 40K. There are people in this that you can kind of get behind. And you get it, you see it in the lore and all that kind of stuff. Now,
I think the thing that makes it more relatable, because I agree with you, because even the orcs are more relatable. They're like, they have more established society, in my opinion. Like, that's like very, like, we've had like Necromunda was obviously released in the past, and Necromunda's out now, and like, but even with like when we got the mining kits that we got for Gene Stealer Cults for 40K, you're like, oh, you're building the world of actual 40K. Like, I'm seeing more like the industry, the mining, the transport. Like, we still don't know what like a bus looks like. Buses are the best, like the most efficient way of moving people from point A to point B. Always will be. So like, buses and trains. Right? Buses and
trams.
trains. Yeah.
Trams. I'll go with trams.
All right, okay, trams. But you know what I mean? Like, we don't necessarily know what they look like in that universe, and so. Yeah. Like, that's kind of, but in this, we knew that there were like magic items that you could buy, banners that were made, cloth where the armor came from, and like, and that's true for like all of the different kind of races in Warhammer Fantasy. You got like the orcs, and I'm like, cool, I know where they got their black iron from, like, and they were located in places, and that was actually quite cool. I think the world was very rich, and it felt very physically real for something that was fake.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, like perhaps this is something too that I don't know enough about. I've never really gotten deep into, and I'm not really even that deep in a fantasy lore. I love to get the idea, and I think that's kind of the point. It's a setting, and you kind of get a feeling for the milieu. Second time I've used that word on this show. But like one thing that does stick out in my head is there's like the one Warhammer novel I think I've ever read cover to cover is Skarsnik. And Skarsnik is, if you know him from Total War, he's the guy who goes, schemes, I got schemes. And he's this like, he's like a bit of a cartoon. When you read Skarsnik, the book, the basically the narrator of the story is an author. I think he's a bit of a Felix. He's an allegory for something that could have happened to the Felix and Gotrek if things had kind of unfolded differently. But he gets captured by a ravening horde of gobos employed by Skarsnik and brought back to his mountain lair. And the scenes of those goblins basically raping and pillaging and murdering and capturing him, and the horror of what a night goblin actually is, despite them being quite comical, they are vicious, scary, evil murderers. And in that context, you're damn right, the humans are good guys. And like, they were just trying to live. They were just trying to live. And these guys are like needle-toothed shitheads. And Skarsnik is amazing, but nonetheless, it is a brutal world that you see people just trying to live in. And yeah, they might be backwards and medieval, but that's all right. There are actual monsters out in the forest. There are actual beastmen running around, and they're just trying to get along. So that's, anyway, relatable in that sense. But I want to get back to the meta of the game development, because this is fun for me. It's all in my head. So 7th edition comes out. This is where a lot of people will point to as where it actually goes wrong. This is incorrect. 7th edition is essentially what's the word? An anthology of all of the stuff that they took from this is what actually I think editions really should be. All the lessons they learned, all the rules that they released for 6th edition, as they sort of expanded on it throughout that development cycle. I think it's about 6 years later. Couldn't be. 05, 06, probably like 06. What did I say? 04 is 4th edition. I want to say 05, 06, somewhere in there is 7th edition Fantasy Battles. And it basically consolidates all of those things. So if you want to be like Galaxy Brain on playing 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles, the way you do it is you play 7th edition core rules, but you use only 6th edition books. Because right now, this is where there's a big lurch. This is where everything kind of starts going sideways for Games Workshop as a company, as a cultural phenomenon. And unfortunately, it all gets laid at the, I'm sure, very sweaty feet of one Matthew Ward. So in this era, you now have basically the ending of whatever the design philosophy was around Thomas and the guys who wrote the 6th edition stuff. And then I don't know why, and there's some great interviews out there on that I've actually heard with Matt, but Matt Ward, for whatever reason, is just handed the design keys to everything. Matt Ward basically writes Games Workshop's output for like, I don't know, like the next 6 years or so, more than that. Matt Ward writes a number of the Army books for 7th edition fantasy battles, and I don't think the thing is that like, there's this thing, there's this concept that I countered recently called the adjacent possible. So essentially, when you're coming out with a new idea or an innovation, if it's too far from like whatever people think of as like what's okay, even if it's a better idea than this, if it's not close enough to what we think is possible, it'll just die. Like it just doesn't work. I feel like Matt Ward would be very comfortable writing in modern day Games Workshop, and I think a lot of the style of rules and the way that he approached things with the power creep or whatever it kind of informed like how Games Workshop continued to be written. But he just eats tremendous shit. And the other thing is that in these days,
what you mean by that is, just to be clear, is it like he took a huge amount of flack on the internet, like
tremendous flack. And there's two things here too, right? Like there's his crunch, so there's his rules writing, which I feel like from a today perspective, looking back, like I felt like, for example, 5th edition Grey Knights, which is the like poster child for overpowered Matt Ward rules writing, and it did come to dominate Warhammer of its era. I feel like that book could have played very well in 7th edition 40K. Like you could have just picked that book up, given it to the Grey Knights in 7th, and it would have been fine.
So like a little known fact, because I know this to be 100% true, is the Gathering Storm books for 40K, which is the launch of 8th edition. Several of those bits at the end of 7th and the beginning of 8th were written by Matt. Just like they just didn't. Rules-wise, and I think maybe some background as well, and just people people just didn't know. So there's that, which is quite fun. And in addition to that, we heard from a recent show that like when the higher ups found out that he was not very popular on the internet, instead of protecting him, which is why a lot of people say that they don't credit their artists now, they instead fired him. Sorry, let him go. Let him go and expand his wings.
It was hard for them to quit. I'm sure by the end of that nightmare, it was somewhat mutual. But like, it's wild to me because the output of Matt Ward is like, this is probably its own conversation, and I would love to understand his career trajectory. But he really does wind up writing the core everything, lore. He writes lore, and he writes core rule books, like, or at least as like a lead writer. He's credited as the writer, so he's certainly taking a very big part of it. He's prolific, and this is a moment in time where Games Workshop is also scaling up their ranges. So they're making they're getting a bit more ambitious with their model design. Technology's advanced a little bit better, so their model kits are starting to look a little sexier. If you look at the kits that are coming out in this era, you'll notice the sprues are getting a little more tightly packed. They're computer designed. They're done in CAD.
Hey, can I just shout out the I think this is the 7th edition box, which is Dwarfs versus Goblins. And,
it's an amazing box.
But also just the actual what they did with the box. So they have art imposed on top of some actual miniatures ranked up behind them,
that's cool. Yeah.
Which is absolutely awesome. Like, because that's always like having worked at GW and tried to film miniatures. One of the things that's really, really difficult sometimes is to integrate the art, the miniature, and some sort of motion. But actually really incredible. I really like that. I really kind of wish they would do this again. This is awesome. This is an awesome front cover.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And in general, that's another thing that gives 6th edition a lot of its flavor and feel, is when you go back to this era, they, for whatever reason, aren't investing a lot into the actual army books themselves. They're not color. Color pages and full color books actually don't start happening for Games Workshop until 8th edition Fantasy, 2010s. Before that, their books are all soft covers and they don't have color, except for a little section in the except for a section in the middle. If you're remembering back, most of what Army books are filled with are line drawings and sort of those lithograph type style things. There's very little color in them aside from the box art and stuff like that. So when they move to color, maybe that's why we actually see a corresponding decrease in quality, is because there's a higher volume of it. So they got to spend more money per piece. But I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Reason I'm bringing up Matt Ward here is that this is like in the history of Games Workshop, and we're talking here too, is why is this game dead? It's amazing, right? So like coming to Warhammer Fantasy, I thought it was going to be a bit of a lark when I started trying to play the tabletop. I was shocked to discover how good this game is. Okay, guys, like this is a really important thing to get across. I'm sure people who are woke to AOS probably feel the same way about that game. And it's amazing to me how good Warhammer Fantasy Battles 8th edition Final Form is as a game, and especially since knowing just how I was very deep into 7th edition 40K, knowing the complete gong show of 7th edition 40K and looking at it in comparison to what 8th edition Fantasy Battles was is like, I don't know, it's apples and oranges. And they're written essentially, they come from a very similar design philosophy, design culture, and it's amazing to me how much better executed Fantasy Battles is. So I want to get there. Because 7th edition, you have Matt Ward. And what Matt Ward's really doing in 7th edition, he's not writing the core rules. He's writing Army books. And you're getting an Army book or two per year in this era of Warhammer. So you're getting these things. So imagine like when in 9th edition, the whole like madness around Drukhari, which did last a year. Imagine that lasted 4 years, or some long stretch of time where one book that's, written basically in a different philosophy is released. It can dominate the game indefinitely, and there's no cavalry coming. No one's coming. Pardon me. No one's coming with a data slate to try and rebalance things. Points aren't being readjusted here. It just is what it is. So when Matt Ward starts writing from a very different place to the way, say, 6th Ed is written, and I think in a lot of ways Games Workshop's doing this in both Fantasy and 40K in a way to try and jolt life into the games. They're bringing in new models. They're aggressively raising the scale of both games, both in the volume of models that you require to have and also in the physical size of the models that are being designed and created. Again, I think some of that's advances in technology. You look at something like you compare the Vampire Count's Black Coach to what the Night Haunt Black Coach looks like, and that kind of gives you an idea of where Fantasy left off, both in scale and to where Games Workshop was going. If you look at a Black Coach, the original little guy on the chariot base, compare him to Nagash, which is released in the end times. Just the scale, scope, beautifulness, and dynamism of those two models, completely wildly different things. And one doesn't look like it fits with the other. So you're basically alienating an existing player base. You're being called money grubbing and like just doing things to try and make money. And at the same time, you're kind of releasing something better, but you're really pissing off your very grumpy, remaining neglected, scorned player base. So Fantasy Battles, because of all of that, I think becomes very, very toxic. And that sort of sets the tables for 8th edition. You've got this really good core rule system in 7th. It now has bolted on top of it a bunch of books that maybe people didn't react too well to, maybe don't necessarily play well together. You have incredibly overpowered demons, which I'd really love to know how that is, because in 8th edition they get punished. But anyway, you get 8th edition. Now, 8th edition brings in a lot of stuff that really, 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 really pisses people off. And most of this does look to me to be kind of cravenly an attempt to squeeze water out of a stone. And by that I mean that there are rules in this game that clearly make it so that you got to go out and build bigger units. You got to have more blocks of infantry.
So 7th edition didn't require as much, because so now sometimes when I join Warhammer Fantasy Battle at 8th edition, so I can jump in for a sec, we jump in and then everyone's like, at least it wasn't 7th, and they're like, well, you play demons or you play dark elves. And I was like, and this is kind of interesting because, like, I would say, having played in the Warhammer Fantasy Battle competitive community and playing in the Age of Sigmar competitive community and the 40k competitive community, is that the Warhammer Fantasy Battle competitive community was much, much worse. And I would say, like, and I never really like been able to like put my finger on it, but a lot of what you've said just there is because these were people who would go through. They were like, "Yeah, you turned up and you played either one of these two armies, and that was your event." And I'm like, "Why the fuck were you playing this game? Like, why was this something you were actively like enjoying and being a part of?" And I felt that was. And I felt that was kind of like really indicative, and you still felt that as a new player in Warhammer Fantasy Battle 8th edition. You felt that you saw these people, and they were like wildly jaded to the other player's experience. Like, I never found that the other player was ever trying to make me have a good experience. The other player was only invested heavily in winning, and like, and that was, it felt like, for me, from the maybe dozen tournaments I went to of Warhammer Fantasy Battle 8th edition in England. That's my interpretation. And I was like, why do you people like this? Like, what the hell?
So that what you're describing is the culture of competitive Warhammer that I come into in 2015. The culture, the best players, in North America and at the WTC. Neil Kerr will talk without taking a breath probably for an hour about how he cleans up the ETC meta by having this awful experience at the ETC and says, screw it, I'll be the ref and I'll lay down the law and we'll change the way people play this game, because it was shitty. It was zero sum. It was you versus the other guy. It was gotchas. It was no take backsies. It was zero recognition for intent. And I don't know where that comes from. It probably comes from a vacuum of no one demonstrating how you can play this game. Which we now, I think, have. We have a lot of really good game role models, I think, that exist in tabletop now, thanks to YouTube and Twitch and that sort of thing. You can look to players and see how high-level players can play this game in a way that is collaborative. And it also, I think, because we've advanced as players themselves, we've realized that this game necessitates being collaborative. Whereas I think maybe Games Workshop didn't quite understand that you can collaborate and still be competitive. And so they weren't able to model that behavior, and they probably still don't quite get that. But it doesn't matter. That is what you described there, I think, is what happens when only the most diehards stay with the game. And I think that's because mechanically, Warhammer Fantasy Battles, especially in 8th edition, is a really good competitive game. And there are some pretty there's just some powerful shit in it. And because so essentially but the game does react to that. So that's what's impressive to me. So people will complain about a couple of things. So the number one criticisms about 8th edition Fantasy Battles, one is going to be something called steadfast. And that's a pretty good one. And then the other one is hordes. So those are the two things, those two rules. If you cut them out of the game, right there, you're going to eliminate the need for massive blocks of infantry. You change Warhammer Fantasy Battles 8th edition significantly if you do that. 3 is how powerful cannons are. A cannon is able to it's basically the equivalent of a las cannon if a las cannon was in the world like it is in the lore, able to just punk anything it wants to. And then 5, I would say in general, would be in the Magic phase. You now have, by the way, one of the coolest phases, a lot of awesome mechanics going on in the Magic phase. But in Magic, you now have what are considered these basically unit killer spells that come out. Just about every lore of Magic has one. Not all of them, but most of them do. Are you telling
me Purple Sun didn't exist until 8th edition?
I can't. I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know if the Purple Sun, it may have existed in some iteration in previous ones, but the effect of Purple Sun of Xerxes certainly is an 8th edition thing. You don't actually see something like that until you get to Skaven in 7th edition. From my understanding, I'm talking out of my ass. I know, for example, Skaven, the last book released in 7th, has some of these big murder spells. But I know for a fact that it's 8th edition fantasy that people start getting pissed off about Magic. And the reason is, so you have basically fish eating other fish. In 40K, what you got in response to this is you give save on save on save, or you modify the save before giving a save on top of a save on top of a save to tweak relative resiliency to different units. But in this, you have cannons that kill monsters, and you have hordes that also kill monsters, but also make you very strong and able to hold the table. And then you have magic that is a bit of a random element, hard to control the odds of it being successful. But you have magic that can sort of trump the hordes and stuff like that. So that way you have sort of this ecosystem of hordes, monsters, and single entity type units, and magic. And those things sort of interplay with one another to create a really interesting dynamic, I think, on the tabletop. And then beyond that, you have, I think, a lot of the benefits of AOS, which is it's largely a game of movement, and that there's a lot that goes into the positioning at deployment, and there's a great deal of efficiency, I think, in actually playing the game, in the sense of you're just pushing around blocks of minis. You don't have to move each one by one. So that's sort of where you get to with the 8th edition. You have very powerful mechanics that, if this is kind of where the Honest Wargamer came from, if you're not aware of the fact that your $100 dragon is just gonna fucking die the second he runs into
one purple sun.
Well, a purple sun, but more likely Empire dwarves, or ogres, all of whom pack cannons and always pack cannons, or Khorne for that matter. Demons have a cannon. That beautiful dragon probably going to die. If they've got to, it's certainly going to die.
I never had an issue. There's a bunch of comments in the chat I want to bring up, but I never had a problem with cannons because I was like, it's a cannon. Like, I think cannons should be strong because they shoot dudes. Like that's the point of a cannon, right? Like, I was cool with that. The spells one was the one that super triggered me because like there was no counterbalance to it. They weren't like, okay, listen, your army's initiative 1, but you can always stop a spell or 2. They're just like, your army's initiative 1 sucks to suck. Like, and you're like, okay. Like, and I mean, that still carries forward. In Age of Sigmar, like, we have, like, bravery is generally low on, like, goblins, for example. It's just generally low. So, like, which is weird because when you build elite units, their bravery is generally pretty high. Like Stormcast is a good example. Their bravery is normally pretty high, and therefore you don't lose as much. Therefore, bravery doesn't affect you as adversely. Whereas then you move over to like fucking hordes of goblins. Their bravery is incredibly low. So if you lose any, just loads more run away, and you're kind of like, oh well, they're not that brave. Maybe they're meant to run away. And you're like, but it doesn't really affect one portion of the army, like of the game state, but it hugely affects the other portion. And that's what I felt about like things like Purple Sun and Pit of Shades. I remember listening to a podcast really long, like a long time back in the day, when I was into Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and someone like gleefully made a podcast about how they just kept like dwellersing noobs, like they kept just pushing forward and doing 6 dice dwellers, and I was literally like listening to this guy, and I think
you're actually thinking of that's a story that Pete tells, where he absolutely destroys a really shitty high elf player. I think just
no, this is legit. I remember folding washing. Yeah. Like I was listening to this podcast.
Okay.
He'd been at a tournament. And he was like, "See, I moved forward the block, and I 6 diced dwellers below, and then I 6 diced dwellers below, and then I 6 diced." And you're like, "Bro, you're not good at Warhammer. Like maybe you're good at that particular interaction and mechanics, but you're just like." The dice are just popping off, and I never liked that element of it. Just that's just for me. So I would very much hope, not knowing that was something that wasn't as strong in the previous versions. I'd love it if that didn't return.
So much like the Honest Wargamer, 6 dice skills is clearly a dig, a long-held grudge. 6 dice skills refers to the fact that you don't actually have fucking skills. You're just rolling 6 dice. And so there it is, folks. In the original ooze that is Warhammer Rob's emergent personality into the tabletop scene is a bitterness towards 8th edition Magic Phase. Here's my counter to that. It's fucking awesome. It is so awesome.
No, it is not awesome.
It is so awesome. So look, I am not good, all right, and I need to say that very clearly. As we start talking in detail about this game, I basically read what's left. It's like when the Pilgrims got to New England and they were like, "Whoa, don't you know there's a bunch of really nice villages here, but everyone's dead." I'm basically just reading their letters and mail. I'm going to old forums and reading old ETC lists that are still hidden in places and trying to understand what people were doing. But the thing is that there's counterplay, right? And that's what's cool about this game is that there's a lot of counterplay. There are books that come out towards the end of editions, specifically High Elves and Dark Elves, that really are top of the pops. They're very, very high. Probably some would argue, although not Adam Camilleri or Peter the Falcon, that Nurgle Demons would also factor into that. They think that they're pushovers. But what's really interesting to me is that when you ask people who were really super invested in this game, what's the best? Give me the best build for blank or whatever. That because this game existed in a era before like instant dissemination of information, before you had people spending. Well, you probably had lots of people spend a lot of their time figuring out what the best things were, but it's not a solved game. Even now, it's not a solved game, and I think that owes a lot to how the game itself does hang very nicely on. We talk a lot about balance. I think balance when you have games this complex is very difficult, but it's a little bit easier in fantasy because you have about half as many factions as you do in 40K now. You have truly the game based and scaled off of Toughness 3. Toughness works like it used to work as it does in Heresy, but essentially, Toughness 3 is a dude. It's an elf. It's a human. That's your base stat. And so when you ramp up from Toughness 3, you're seeing stuff at Toughness 5, some things at Toughness 6, rarely things at Toughness 7. So like it's all kind of happens at a scale that makes sense. So you have things that their relative power. There's a lot of verisimilitude, another massive friggin' word there, where the relative power of units on the tabletop to me makes sense. So when you have these massive, explosions of magic or whatever, which are double-edged swords, by the way, magic can go really bad for you, just as it can go bad for your opponent, especially when you're 6 dice and all of the time. Mitigating the downside of the magic phase is not necessarily easy. There's lots of opportunity for counterplay. So I think that this game was not solved, and I think that the thing is that it required a massive amount of investment and time and effort, and that to understand the counterplay and how these things work into each other so that you could get past the Chun-Li fucking leg kick move finally, the thing that's referenced in Playing to Win. There are things that you can always spam on noobs and destroy them with, but if there's no culture to overcome those easily spammed things, if there's no culture of learning and teaching and developing and being good at the game, and trying to solve those riddles, then yeah, you're just going to wind up with a lot of very frustrated people, and you're going to wind up with people who are like, screw this, I'm going to go play 6th edition when I remember liking this game. And by the way, there was tons broken in 6th edition too. Don't tell anyone.
So we actually are going to approach the coming of the old world, because it is coming. Like, it is going to end, it is going to come. We're approaching it from different angles, Val. Like, whereas you're currently like, yeah, this is where it is, this is the shit. And my personal opinion, and I enjoyed playing Warhammer Fantasy Battle, I want to be very clear, but I have never felt the frustration playing some of the more modern games that I ever felt playing Warhammer Fantasy Battle.
It's wild.
Like wild. Unpacked an army, someone rolled 6 dice and just took off my army, and I went home. And I was like, I don't know why we're here. And I know people have got modern examples of where they did this with 40K. Maybe they need more terrain, and there are examples of like Alpha Strike armies that work really well in Age of Sigmar, and there has been points in time in Age of Sigmar where there's been armies on 70-80% win rates. So obviously those have been problems as well. And I've been very clear, and we've vocalized and discussed it. Like, the enjoyment on the tabletop should be something that is baked into it should be baked into the game, and it should be what develops the culture of the tabletop experience. Because ultimately, I build, buy, paint these miniatures so I can go play some games with my friends or make new friends. Yeah, go for it.
So we're talking about the evolution of like basically fantasy battles. How did we get to the end? And also, I'd love to now touch to like this is the base case. This is where we are. This is what 8th edition fantasy battles is as it's released. As 2010 is when it comes out, and as I was mentioning the Matt Ward thing, and whether or not you agree or not, the internet really starts shitting right on down GW's throat. It really gets upset with GW.
But also GW were awful at that time.
Look,
as a reference point.
I'm not here to blame. I am here to point out, though, this is when GW says, you know what? Fuck you guys. I'm going home. And they retreat from the public space. They go full Howard Hughes. They go into their ivory tower or limestone castle or whatever the hell castles are made out of in Nottingham, and they hang out there. And that means that when you see the start of 8th edition, you have FAQs, you have answers from designers to make, say, older rules work with the newer rule set. You have like clear engagement. But by the time you're about mid-edition, which roughly coincides with 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles, Warhammer 40K, that's when GW pulls up the drawbridge. Screw you guys, I'm going home, and they delete their online accounts. They stop posting to YouTube. By the way, I'm pretty sure the original Games Workshop YouTube channel still exists. It's hilarious, and they just stop talking to everybody for 5 or 6 years at least. So, games. This is where I think some of the magic starts to happen, because in the vacuum of Games Workshop dealing with its game, people are faced with, okay, I can be like Rob, I can make a snarky Twitter handle, I can be pissed about the game, or we can try and do something. And so you see a lot of community comps start to, or rules packs start to bubble up in this time period, and they're pretty advanced, and they go a lot further than any of the ITC style FAQs, the Nova FAQ, the ETC FAQ in 40K and 7th and 6th edition. They tried to fix the game that was broken on release. These ones that are happening for 8th edition are basically setting unit limits. They're also giving points to underpowered armies. In ETC, for example, I believe the base army was 2,400 points. Yep, it's 2,400 points. And if you were playing with, say, Tomb Kings, I believe you got 10% extra points or so. I think you got like 2,600 or 2,700 points to play with, which is kind of neat. By the way, I think that's the way you handicap all of these games. You just give or take points. But anyway, so that you had these reactions, and then people would use them. What Swedish Comp is a very widely used tournament pack that was used for trying to take the harder edges off of the game, things that were sort of like set up and lose scenarios, like what you just described, Rob. You have a South Coast, which is where AOS. That's the primordial ooze that AOS comes out of. Well, prior to that, they had their own popular GT packet that was used for 8th edition. ETC had a very well-developed pack that reflected their values in the game as well. You also had very advanced tournament communities around the people still playing this game very seriously. In North America, there was an invitational Masters event that was based off of regional qualifiers, all community-driven. The ETC, what we know of as the WTC today, was a Warhammer Fantasy Battles tournament. And where did all these people go? When the world explodes in the year 2015, some of them move on and they create Ninth Age or whatever, but that turns into a weird gong show, and I don't know how much uptake it gets. But nonetheless,
I think it's quite popular. Just anecdotally, I was at a tournament in the summer, and there was 100 people playing Ninth Age just downstairs of the tournament. Like we were on the mezzanine. I think it's a popular system, and for people, just to be clear, what they did was they carried on Warhammer Fantasy Battle, but rewrote it for themselves. Then obviously they took all the IP out because obviously, like taking the IP out is quite important.
This is also the era of Games Workshop's like, not only screw you guys, but we're going to sue every one of you fuckers. So GW, so like when you go back and read all of this era, there's paranoia. It's hard sometimes to understand what's going on the list because they're afraid to write the points because they think that someone's gonna.
I remember
reading a forum and sue them because they published points.
I remember reading like a Lizardman forum, and they wouldn't they referenced I think they didn't reference everything by points. They referenced it by something else.
Yeah, and like euphemisms and shit. It's like speakeasies and the fucking prohibition. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a euphemism because they were Skaven slaves. Yeah, it cost. Thank you. It was something like that. It cost because Skaven slaves were a point. And so you're like, oh, this unit's 37 Skaven slaves. And you're like,
yeah.
And I'm like, what? And that's an insane, when your consumer base is making code-worded language to be able to discuss your game. I got to say two things about this, Val, because I know you've got still loads in the tank and we're running short on time. But I played in that period of time. That's when I first entered into my Games Workshop like universe, and and it was an incredibly insane time. And some of those times were motivators for why I went to work there, because I was like these people need help. They are idiots. And that's still true today. Hey, hello, Timmy Fish in the chat. But it was a very odd time, and it was quite clear how again, I'm trying to really express this for people who are new. We lived in a time when people wouldn't discuss the game system's fundamental core elements, because they were worried the game creators would sue them just for discussing it. Not discussing it negatively, not discussing it, in fact, constructively discussing how to use those units to play games, how to enjoy the product. It would be like suing someone for making a tech video on how to set up a screensaver on your iPhone. They were terrified, and it was a very weird time, and we're not miles away from that. Many of the people still who work at that company are still people who lived and created stuff in that time and space. So that's something.
Why aren't we suing them anymore? What's going on here? Let's just sue them. Yes. There's a great this is all part of the meta Games Workshop lore. But yes, Games Workshop is a tremendously litigious, and this culminates in something called what is it? Chapter House. Yes, Chapter House. By the way, the transcripts of Chapter House, some of the best internal knowledge and information that has ever been released into the public sphere, comes from the Chapter House transcripts and court reportings. And I think that's largely, believe it or not, I think that's actually why Games Workshop stops fucking suing people. It's because they lose badly against one guy who's like, you know what? No, I'm not just going to get bullied by you. They lose badly, and then they wind up having to go in court and defend their stances on a lot of stuff. And it winds up revealing a lot to the public about how not particularly special or secret their sauce is, and it's quite embarrassing. And they realize that, hey, maybe there's a better way to go about this at some point, which is great. This is also very similar to why I believe Elon Musk winds up buying Twitter, is that he realizes that if he has to fight his obligation to purchase Twitter, he has to release a whole lot of very nasty information about himself, which he did, by the way. I know what are the Twitter files are fascinating. Much more fascinating are all the tech bro friggin' bumpkins texting Elon in the lead up to the purchase of Twitter. Fascinating series of text messages. If you think rich people are special, please, I encourage you, read the text message exchanges over the $44 billion purchase of Twitter.
He is the most divorced person in the whole world. Woo! He is so divorced. You know what?
Can you imagine how much better the world would be if Elon was in South Africa, and instead of being like, I'm going to move to Canada so that way I can sneak in the United States through school and just try and become super wealthy. If he just accidentally walked past a Games Workshop and then just started playing Warhammer, he would have the world would be a very different place.
He would be the worst though. He would be an absolute shit house to play.
So we got 31 minutes, and I swear to God, this is all going somewhere, and I do want to get there because this is where we are today. This is where I want to get to.
Okay, you said there were 40. So you said what? So Games Workshop stopped making the game in a series called The End Times, which we neglected to talk about. But they for the very first, I'll give the quick TLDR. For the very first time, it looked like they were actively creating huge, big scope project stuff for Warhammer Fantasy Battle. They're like, boys, we're doing something called The End Times. Huge new sculpts you've never seen. Massive Nagash. You've never seen anything like it. We've just released Dwarfs. We've just released Wood Elves. We've just released Dark Elves. All new sculpts. If you were in Warhammer Fantasy Battle at that time, you were like, they are on it. We've got 4 new books, which was a lot in kind of over a 2-year period. Dozens of new sculpts. And then we got these End Times, huge, massive bound books, huge amounts of story, big releases. And you're like, okay, huge stuff, this ongoing story, amazing. And then they just deleted it. It's like if they did the first 2 Lord of the Rings out the bat, and then they just never made the 3rd Lord of the Rings. If the second one was and that's the end. Insane.
This
time.
is actually this is another fascinating thing I think worthy of its own podcast.
We should do another
series,
time.
But just just the end of a universe like this. So this is End Times is 2015. So 30-ish. 30 plus years of people being invested in this, and it literally ends with the end. Like it's over. The world is over. Like it just like that. And it's not. And yes, it's telegraphed. As someone from my position, looking back at something called the End Times and being like, "You guys didn't see this fucking coming." Like it's kind of it's funny, but you don't like fantasy's been filled, and this is something they referred to in the designer news notes recently. Fantasy's always been filled with this portent of impending doom.
Yeah.
That's what the grim darkness is, and that's also true in Warhammer 40,000. They both have this, 10 seconds to midnight, chaos is coming. The difference is that for whatever reason, Games Workshop is now reframing it as, in fantasy world, chaos's victory is inevitable. They leave 40K out of it. They don't talk about that. Maybe it is inevitable, maybe it's not. But chaos wins, and the world explodes. People are, I think, understandably crushed. To be quite frank, I think like if your favorite thing in the world ended in a poorly written paragraph that was clearly like rushed out in a very narrow period of time, then yeah, you'd probably be upset. And I think this is actually its own thing. But anyway, fantasy dies. What happens next? Because enter the year 2015. We mentioned Ninth Age. Ninth Age is something that developed out of the ETC to create, I'd say, probably a more tournament-centric or game-centric rule set. And I think the general consensus on it is they did that very well, but because they take the Warhammer out of it, out of fear, it loses that je ne sais quoi. It loses the Warhammeriness of it. And it becomes, I think, one of the main criticisms of it that I've seen is that it's because it's focused on balance. Your factions are very samey. Your factions have a lot of mirrored options, and there's less rock, paper, scissors, and there's just a whole lot of Swiss Army knives. And anyway, talking out my butt, I don't actually know that. It'd be great to actually talk to somebody who loves Ninth Age to talk about the nuance. But the funny thing is that today you have people play the old editions. 6th edition, I'd say, is very popular. 8th edition, I play. I think it's fairly popular. I like comped versions of it. You have 9th Age, very popular. You've got games that are filling the void of the rank and flank fantasy battle, like Kings of War.
One-page rules.
More recently, the more recently released, what's that one? I don't know. It's a
Conquest of Kings.
Conquest of Kings, Age of Song of Ice and Fire. And then you have a really amazing passion project that says IP. What the F is that? Which actually has been actually existed all the way through this period, called the Warhammer Armies Project, written by a guy in, I believe, Finland, Sweden, Matthias Eliasson. He might be Swedish, might be Finnish. Shit, I think he's Swedish. Anyway, Matthias has basically rewritten.
It's okay. You're only offending him if he's Finnish. No one in Sweden minds being called Finnish, but I think everyone in Finland minds being called Swedish. So it's maybe because the Swedish don't want to fuck with the Finnish.
As a half Estonian, I'm a little upset that I can't. That's why I rolled the R's in Pirinen, even though my tongue can barely do it. Anyway, I'm pretty sure Matthias is Swedish, but that's because there's a lot of actually active Warhammer fantasy going on in Sweden. But anyway, you get Warhammer Armies Project. Warhammer Armies Project comes from the fact that there are a couple neglected stepchildren of Warhammer fantasy all the way through the end. These are the Dogs of War, who are a 5th edition fantasy army book. They get a very brief White Dwarf article, and then nothing else when the 6th edition transition happens. So Matthias starts by writing new rules for the Dogs of War, updating them so that they sort of work in 8th edition. And he starts doing that, I think, almost at the beginning of the edition. I think it's like 2010, 2011, something like that. So by the time the fantasy ends, he had rewritten Dogs of War, he had rewritten Bretonia, and then fantasy ends, and he just keeps going. So he rewrites he rewrites the entire thing, Warhammer Fantasy Battles, using, download these before Old World IP enforcement really gets crazy. He must be in Sweden, because I think they've got some IP rules that are different, but maybe that's wrong. But I'd say go out and get these army books. Each army book is basically the condensed every written line of lore for every single faction. Each of his army books are about 200 PDF pages long. They are made and designed to look exactly like a Games Workshop army book. It's a little bit funny. What I was first getting into, and then he also starts to expand out into civilizations, factions, races that didn't exist in the actual Warhammer Fantasy Battles core thing. But he rewrites everything. He rewrites all the core books. He adds units to the army rosters for each one that maybe are mentioned in lore but never actually created on the tabletop. He gives no Fs whatsoever. And from what I gather, does at least as good of a job as the Games Workshop studio has done in the past. The current edition is actually Warhammer Armies Project 9th ed. It's a 9th edition of Warhammer Fantasy, and it blends, I think, from a core rules perspective. It takes a lot of the very easily answered questions about 8th edition, kind of addresses them. Basically, deals with the hordes issue, adds more variability to cannons, does a lot of fun stuff with the magic phase. I think the magic in this game is really, really, really well done. And then, like all Warhammer games, shits the bed on a couple of the army's books. So there's a few factions that are considered to be a little overpowered. And there's just so many of them, I don't know how you wouldn't wind up with some outliers. So it's a really, really cool thing. Well worth your time. I think this, if you're looking to get into Old World, there's enough people talking about Warhammer Armies Project and playing it that it's not a bad entry point.
I think that should be we should legitimately walk away and then on another show be like, how would we approach getting into or starting to be excited about playing in the Old World? I got to say a couple of things about this though, Val, because I think I think what's probably, and I'm currently looking through the Cathay book that you talked about, and there's like Cathay, Halflings, loads of armies that weren't fully realized in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, which is super fun. But for me, I would say if we're concentrating on the Old World that Games Workshop produced versus, because you're right, when the Old World comes out, this has a target on its head from a lawyer. I'm gonna feel like, but we'll talk about that.
It still exists. If it's not down already, I suspect there's a reason for that.
Okay, all right. Well, so quite interesting, and the everything in it looks fantastic. Loads of cool art and everything else. I would say though that like one of the things that Warhammer Army Projects probably tries to do, based on just your very small description, is that probably it tries to be iterative. So it probably tries to, like, the next edition, like 9th edition, or like, so they've done a 9th edition, will probably be trying to improve upon what they did in 8th edition.
Their 9th edition is already in a 2.0. Yes. So he's already done a mass update, and I think he's working through a 3rd update. Yeah.
That's my point, right? Whereas Games Workshop's model, and I would assume that this will continue to be their model, is that they try to not fully rewrite the game, but make it different enough from its predecessor that they can then sell you a new set of army books. So while I absolutely think this is great and wonderful, and I'm going to just pour through this, I would say, like, as a way of maybe getting into it, I think definitely for the lore and all those other bits, understand the unit rosters and stuff could be super fun. I'd be conscious about picking up and learning those crunchy rules, which might be out of, like, date. I guess Warhammer Fantasy Battle Projects probably will continue on through Old World if it's allowed to. But
so if you believe the way the designers have talked about how Old World is theoretically being designed, which is taking the all of the editions and sort of cherry picking the best rules, concepts, and mechanics from them, that's kind of what WAP does. So, and also hilariously, Wet Ass Pussy is also WAP. So Warhammer Armies Project Wet Ass Pussy is hilarious, makes me giggle because I'm a child every friggin' time. But nonetheless, WAP, also a racial slur. There's a lot of layers to this, Rob.
There's a lot of layers to Warhammer Army Projects. We're covering a lot of ground.
So here's my argument for WAP. And by the way, I did wind up choosing 8th. I think 8th honestly is the best entry point for fantasy battles because there is simply the most about it out there. If you're alone and you need to learn about a game and teach others and like build a community, which is essentially what I've had to do, that like WAP doesn't have YouTube videos about. Like, it's got some, but not a ton. There's not like international tournament metas that you can go back and look at like what were the best ideas from. So WAP to me was a bridge too far. I went with 8th. However, WAP sits in the middle, I think, of 6th edition and 8th edition. So if you're a person who loves 8th edition and everyone around you loves 6th edition, I think WAP is essentially a compromise choice. And you can play with only the Games Workshop factions from it. You don't have to use all the crazy stuff, but you can if you want to. But like, I think it's a really cool compromise, and I think it's an evolution. It really is it's a true 9th edition adaptation of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. He doesn't reinvent the wheel anywhere. It feels like the studio could have produced this rule set. As a result, it's, I'd say, extra clunky. If you find some of the mechanics of Fantasy Battles to be clunky, his solution to rules is in fact more rules. So like it doesn't feel like a streamlined thing, but it is, I still think, a very delightful thing to play, and you can go out there and see people playing it out there. So that's kind of where we are. We have, I'd say right now, 3 things that are played in large quantities. The largest, hard to know if it's 8th or 6th. Feels like 6th, certainly more active on Facebook anecdotally. And then you have out there, as far as creators are concerned, I'd love to plug some. The first one would be a forum that was like indispensable to me called 8th Edition for Life, EFFL. The boys writing 8th Ed for Life are all out of Rochester or in that neighborhood, upstate New York. I got to play with them back in November. I didn't know that the 2 things were related. It's hilarious. But there's a repository of a lot of, like, where a lot of people basically cut and pasted. It's like the Fallout vault of 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy. They have just piled a lot of the sort of group knowledge into there. But it would be, I'd say the level of competitive discourse and content is what you would expect if you were to go to Daka Daka today. It's people doing their best, bringing out their hot takes, but it's not necessarily, I'd say, if we were to like find the old ICQ chat messages from the ETC teams, probably a different tone level there. You can get those lists from Blood of Kittens, by the way. All the old ETC lists are still available there. But anyway, moving on from there, you then have in the United Kingdom, very close to you, Rob, you have a group of guys who are playing 8th edition fantasy right now, and they run tournaments that sell out immediately. And I'm continuing to talk until I remember what the hell their name is, because I pay them £5 a month. They're called King's Crown? Kings? Oh, come on, stupid brain. I've remembered so many things. Why
You've done
now?
really well.
Why
Can we
now?
just shout out Val for doing incredibly well on the intro show? I think there's been a lot. I think a lot of people are like, what the fuck did he say? We're going to break this all down over the course of like more and more episodes and more things in the future. We'll take our time. They're not called Kings of War. I'm almost certain.
Triple Crown Wargaming.
Triple Crown
Wargaming are 3 guys doing their damnedest to keep 8th edition alive. They have their own comp pack. They actually had 2 GTs sell out. So they and they run one that's they have a narrative one that they run too, but they are over in Derby Deathmatch.
Gross.
Yeah,
absolutely gross.
I love how much UK hates other parts of the UK. I'm sure in Derby someone's like, well, where's Rob? And then someone's like, oh, he's in Nottingham. And then they're like, fucking Nottingham. And then you both shit on Birmingham.
Well, we're uphill. We're uphill. Derby's downhill. So it rains on them all the time. Screw that.
Got it.
With not much time.
So Derby, Birmingham. Where are we?
Birmingham's much better than Derby. Like,
whoa, never heard anyone say something positive about Birmingham. That means Derby sucks.
Go around the bull ring. Have a great time. Yeah, Derby.
So anyway, they're doing 8th edition. I'm just going to keep going. Mountain Miniatures. He plays a ton of games. If you want to watch games, he plays a lot of live battle reports. That's Steve. He's a mini wargaming guy. Does a lot of his own stuff. And then over on stateside, you've got Square Hammer. Square Hammer produces a lot of content and runs events in North America using mostly pivoted almost entirely to Warhammer Armies Project. If you want to see all of these games in action, actually, shockingly, I'm going to plug. He's not mini wargaming, but he's adjacent. Steve, the Mountain. He plays on a weekly basis Warhammer Fantasy Battle games, live streams them. He also does handheld bat reps, and he plays all of these editions that I just mentioned. So if you want to see these things in action, he will actually like trot out, 7th edition core rules with 6th edition books. He plays Warhammer Armies Project. He plays 8th edition. I'm sure he gets the rules all jumbled, but nonetheless, if you want to get an idea for the sort of the vibe of each one of these editions, you can't get much better than that. And then these guys, I think, do a really great job of trying to keep 8th edition fantasy battles going, and they have a pretty reasonable comp system. Their comp system isn't particularly heavy-handed, and I think is pretty good if you want to take the hardest edges off of 8th.
Well, so with not much time left on the clock, I think it's worth talking about, like, just very quickly. Thank you to Miracle for donating £10 to the chat. What up? What up? That's fab. That's super lovely of you and kind. Thank you. Val, you've done great there. Loads to digest and talk about. But like, what I wanted to talk about is kind of something that's really relevant for me. Because if you wanted me right now to play any of those game systems, as you know, I was in Canada with you not long last year, and we played a game. We got we played 2.5 turns of Warhammer.
Miracle.
It was a miracle. We did so well. But the bit for me is that I'm not interested in any of the current games. And actually, the same criticism for, the ways to play Warhammer Fantasy Battle, the criticism that I have of Warhammer Fantasy Battle from when I picked it up in 8th edition is still relevant now from a game design perspective. And I'm a game person more than I am anything else. Like, that's kind of like my driving factor why, so if you've been listening to this show, many things Val's been talking about, because he's also a games person. I don't know if he knows that, but he is. Like, he literally has described different mechanics. Like, he went through the elements of why 8th edition required more units. Like, he knew that. Like, so, like, from, like, a mechanics perspective, like, I'm not that interested in the old world or the upcoming old world. Side
note. Why are you doing this to yourself, Rob?
What do you mean?
Why are you doing this? You are going to be so crushed.
No.
Whatever the new bullshit is comes out, and it's just 8th 2.0. Like, you're gonna fucking be so like you're just lining. You're just like, you know what? I'm not indignant enough about the way things are going. I'm just going to set myself up for the biggest fall in the world. I'm coming from a place where I don't give a shit what happens. I'm actually kind of excited to see the lore explored, new models, that kind of stuff. I could give a fuck about what they do with the game, because I just described games you could play for the rest of your life. Each one of those have so much meat on their bones and they are all complete. You don't need another thing ever to be released by Games Workshop. You can enjoy this stuff. Why say I'm not interested in mechanics, but Old World will be different when you know you were just going to be fed your own asshole?
No, because I don't think the Old World will be different. That's my point. You just let me get there, right? My point is that I think that more than likely it's going to be old curmudgeon-y game design, yeah, which things like Star Wars Legion and MCP outstrip it by leagues. Even updated versions of its own game system, Warhammer Fantasy Battle Projects, for example, are better versions probably of already than what's going to get released. The reason I'm excited is I think the same reason that many other people who've never played Warhammer Fantasy Battle, all the things that you just described, there's going to be some people who are, I like the old world, I'll listen to this episode 1, and they'll be like, what the fuck? They'll be coming from playing like modern games, maybe computer games where there are FAQs and updates and all this other stuff. Maybe they came from D&D, maybe they played from the old world, like where there are dev notes and patch notes. And so the reason that I'm excited about the old world is because of everything other than the game. I love the miniatures and I love the setting. I have started doing the Necromunda show, for example. All of us, the other day, we found out that the combined rules for Necromunda are 1,100 pages long. Over 1,000 pages, yeah, right? But the point is, but listen, Val, for a sec, so I can just finish, yeah? We immediately, like, they were like, that's if you do campaign, let's do the other stuff. And then the chat and me discovered that you can just do pick up Necromunda, where you just make 1,000-point army or squad gang, and you just play it, and you don't give a shit, right? And that's where I'm at, because I'm like, cool. I want to paint up some little... this is something iconic, and actually, my friend, I'm going to quickly show everyone on the screen if I can find it. My friend, when like when not Dark Tide, Vermintide was out. We discussed it. This is I'm showing on the screen for people on the podcast. This is the iconic kind of like fantasy image for me. It's a fire wizard from the Empire. Yeah, it's like some of the most evocative shit that exists for me. Like, and sure, there are wizards who cast fire in Age of Sigmar, or I don't know, in Conquest of Kings or something, but there's just something viscerally Warhammer Fantasy about it for me. And I think the Warhammer Fantasy universe, which is something I've read loads about, super into the narrative, the lore, the background, like, that's what I want to get into. So I actually think that already the game design element will be a bit of a flop, but I'm not too bothered about that because it was already a flop in my eyes. 8th edition was already a bag of shit, in my opinion. Yeah, and so I don't mind playing that same bag of shit if I get to push my dudes around. Does that make sense? Like, I'm quite excited about like discussing it, flaws and all, because if they bring the universe back at some point, Val, maybe not in our lifetimes, they'll have to get someone in who roughly understands game design, and it gets like Warhammer Fantasy, but the Old World's 3rd edition, as an example, might eventually become something that's like more palatable as a game. So that's where I'm from, because I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go. I'm glad it's back because the narrative's back. If it's the same game, I'll be like, oh no. So you and me are in the same place. We don't really give a shit, but we're excited it's coming. I don't know. Are you actually excited it's coming back? That's the question.
Sit down Wii or toxic mask?
Yeah, do you sit down to Wii or stand up to Wii?
I'm a stand-up guy.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
No, there's nothing wrong with sitting. In fact, one time a friend of mine was tremendously wasted at my house, and I thought he was trying to take a shit in my bathtub, but turned out he just sit down when he peed, and it was the first time I encountered this in the wild. Anyway, yes, he also peed in my bathtub, but it wasn't a huge dump, and that's what mattered. I think there's a concept I think around Warhammer that I've been coming to that maybe I didn't quite get at the beginning, but I get now. I used to always be offended by this idea of people bragging about being a casual. I'm a casual Warhammer fan. I'm just in it. I just like looking at the pictures, or I just like painting the minis. I'm casual. I don't take it too seriously. And I used to pedantically scream in every podcast that I could get on, which was basically every podcast, that there is no such thing as a casual Warhammer player or Warhammer fan. This is the most crazily complex, deep time sink, fucking multiverse rabbit hole bullshit you could ever get into, and it doesn't have a bottom. And that's why we get sucked so heavily. That's why they breed just fanatical fans, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And I think, and I think that's it. The complexity of getting into this, of learning about it, of doing it, and all that kind of shit. Everything that screams, this is stupid. Why would anyone do this? It is dumb. Those are in fact features, not bugs. And the fact that it is hard means that people have to invest so much more into it. And I think that's probably also. They don't know this. I doubt that they are rationally thinking this, but I think that's part of, too, why Games Workshop is reluctant to actually truly simplify. It becomes complicated. And to be part of the group that is in the know, that knows how to play these silly games, that can field an army on a fucking tabletop of shit you built, like that is such a that's what the gatekeeper is. The hobby, this culture, this thing that you do itself. That's the gatekeeper, and
I gotta say though,
complexity of rules, I think, is part of that.
I gotta say though that there's a line. They hit the line with Necromunda. They were like, "This is too far. Like we've gone too deep on this process." And interestingly, it's coming out of Forge World as well. Something we should discuss on another show. So it's coming out of Forge World, and it's not coming out of Main Studio. There's the war between Main Studio and Forge World over this project, which is a really exciting conversation to have in the future. There's loads of stuff to go through. We haven't even talked about the fact that we can build and produce these armies from 3D sculpts very readily nowadays. So that's really exciting as well, which is not what was really available for when Warhammer originally came out. The IP is massively generic, loads of stuff to talk about there as well. We have the whole Total War community potentially moving into playing this game in a physical perspective, or some elements of it potentially.
What percentage? It's like, what percentage of them do you have to convert into buying models before you like outstrip the entire population of Warhammer 40K?
Well,
just
so you know,
2%?
There are currently 30,000 people signed up in the ITC for 40K. They sold 1.4 million units of Warhammer 3 Total War. So if you just took 10% of those people, turned them into Warhammer Fantasy Battle players, you'd have 140,000 Warhammer Fantasy Battle players.
And if you took 1%, you'd still have a multiple of the current amount of people playing, right? Like, yeah.
But the other point is, and long conversation on another show, is will they ever, because there's absolutely no way a group of old dudes are making Warhammer Fantasy Battle. There is not a young group of people who are like, listen, there's a huge player base here. Let's convert them. We need easy buy-in boxes. We need people to move and orientate straight into this. You can't have the price point be too high. Can't be £800 immediately for the first army. We need gradual progression to get this in. And that isn't what's going to happen. We're going to have a launch box. Then we won't hear nothing for a year. It's going to be a fucking... But I'm excited. I'm really excited. I'm super glad you're excited because
what sucks is I can't tell you how fucking tired I was of complaining about Warhammer 40K. People love Warhammer 40K, okay? People love going to tournaments. They love playing it. They love painting it. They love doing all the things. They love buying the new stuff. They love participating in the community. And a lot of them, too, they love to complain. It's all part of it, right? It's this thing. But I couldn't open my mouth about Warhammer 40K without just being such a piece of shit about it. And that's not cool. I don't want to be hating on something that other people are clearly enjoying because of my own problems with stuff that's beyond my control. So it has been an incredible breath of fresh air to go back and play this game because it's not getting messed with. Yeah, it's flawed. It's not perfect, but it's entirely community driven at this point by definition. It is the people who play it really want to play it, and it's actually, to me, the 8th edition itself. It's like when I met my in-laws. Like I had a version of who they were in my head based on what I was told about them, and then I met them, and I was like, "What? These people are cool." And 8th edition is a great game. I will say that to you because you got your ass blown out by not being ready for Purple Sun. Shocker. Then that's probably on you, pal, or the comp system you were playing in. And I think that
just the
Fantasy
South
Battles
Coast
8th
GT
edition
that
is
you
good.
formerly mentioned, best Chaos Dwarf player 2016. Yeah, saying.
All right, Initiative 1 dudes, there might be a problem there with the Purple Sun.
Anyway, I feel I was prepped. I feel I did pretty well. But anyway, doesn't matter. We don't need to go through that.
I got you inflamed right at the last second. And I have to be away next week, so you got to bring someone else. But the week after that, I'll be back if you'll have me, even though I ended off by insulting you. But I think that's a good way to spice it up.
I think that's a great way to spice it up. People like the show dynamic between different hosts. They enjoy that element. Val, you've been wonderful. Nice to have a passionate, wonderful person on the show. Thanks very much. My co-host for the Old World show. We need a logo and stuff. We'll do that soon. Did
I make co-host? Did I just get to be co-host now?
You were always going to be co-host.
You're using a lot of first-person singular when you're describing this, and I just sort of forced myself on you. But by the end of this I got the co-host status, I feel good about it.
This is always going to be... There's easy ways to manipulate you. Let me tell you what they are. If I'm like, hey, in 4 weeks' time, we're going to meet up on Thursday evening, you'd be like, hey, Rabbo, let me check my thing. But if I'm like, very late at night, I might talk about the Old World tomorrow, you're like, I will get up! I will emerge from my slumber! It's very easy to organise that. Anyway, thanks for listening to Old World. If you do like it, do like and subscribe. Share it with your Old World friends. If you're an Old World curmudgeon, welcome to the new world. It's been great.